is we're going to do a quick, just folks are going to share their name, their affiliation, and then one sentence about that affiliation, so folks have a little bit of a sense of what it is. And then I'm just going to take a bunch of questions from all of you of what are the things you'd love to hear us talk about. And then we'll use that to weave a conversation so that we start with where your interests are rather than what we think you all want to hear about. Does that sound okay? So be ready with your questions.
Do you want to introduce yourself too? Did you do that? Okay. Hi, my name's Emily Baum. I'm with a group called Reboot Democracy, rebootdem.com. It's a group of people that got together to help bridge politics and technology and create an ecosystem of support for innovators that are working across the ecosystem of democracy. So that's everything from the way that information is spread in the media to citizen engagement outside of an election cycle to how elections are run to voting. So all of those things interacting with one another. We find early stage teams and we help connect them with resources.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Andrea Hailey, and I run Civic Engagement Fund, which is an organization that works to provide accelerator and grassroots, sorry. Let me start that again. I'm Andrea Hailey. I run Civic Engagement Fund, and we provide capacity building and infrastructure for grassroots organizations.
I'm Kipp, Kipp Mueller. I run Resurgent Left. We are we do fundraising sometimes through in-person events around the country. We have a slate of candidates, and we go to people telling them we're like a mutual fund for good candidates to support around the country. Just give us your money. We'll disseminate it amongst these people. They're federal, state, and local, primarily women, people of color who are young and leading the resistance. So, yeah.
Great. I'm Romy with Tides. We do C3 and C4 fiscal sponsorship and grant making. And I'm here to definitely answer any questions you may have. I'm super excited.
My name is Jesse Thomas. I'm the head of product at a company called CrowdPAC in San Francisco. We are a crowdfunding platform for candidates and causes and everything in the middle. Our largest market is candidates, and the thing they like is we let people collect pledges of support before they officially declare to test the waters, and if they have enough support, oftentimes they come in and they run for office. Quick question, how many people are focused on raising money for candidates? Anybody? Okay, cool.
Johnathan, Zucker. I'm the founder of ItStartsToday. We are creating a funding floor for Democratic nominees in state legislatures and for Congress.
Fabulous. And as I said, I'm at New Media Ventures. We fund progressive tech and media startups looking to catalyze innovation broadly to advance progressive change. And let's hear from all of you what you'd like to hear in this conversation. Just where I'm going to basically take all the, a number of questions, and then we'll go from there. So go ahead.
I'm on the board of the Democratic Party of Evanston, and we're just one of the lowest areas with Congressman Justilien. We have this wonderful excess of capacity and wonderful things. So we're doing a new initiative called Midwest Alliance for Progressives, and the gentleman, Kipp, is going to be speaking about that after you guys finish. So the reason I'm here is we need help with fundraising. We already have a group. We're a local Democratic Party. The purpose of this new thing that we're putting together is to outreach to the other local Democratic parties to share our excess capacity in Michigan, Wisconsin just happened to come to Iowa, but we need to fundraise to be able to build the infrastructure, so we listed all the other groups, all the other local Democratic parties. So I'd love to know the role of that fundraising for local Democratic parties.
Fundraising for local Democratic parties. Great. Go ahead.
I'm a candidate for alderman in the South Side, and so figuring out how to best approach community members who aren't middle class but still have the capacity to give, and like just how to approach that.
Great. Yeah. How to approach folks who might not have a lot of means, but can still donate. Yep. What other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm the founder of a crowdfunding platform that uses oppositional data to fund micro donations, because sometimes you know what you oppose, you don't necessarily know what you support
Yeah, so what motivates donors in particular around repeat donations and not just one time kind of peak. What else? For folks who just joined us, we're going through what questions you have for the panel, and then I'll kind of weave a conversation based on that. So we're starting with your interests instead of mine. Anything else? Go ahead.
So I've run crowdfunding campaigns in the past that have been pretty successful. A lot of times they're with existing lists of supporters, though. And I'm curious if over the last year any of you all have done crowdfunding campaigns that caught fire, and what, if anything, you think has changed in the last 12 to 18 months in terms of best practices.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, a lot has changed. Go ahead.
The argument between building your email list and doing the all caps panicky, sort of fundraising appeal, burning people out, possibly having them unsubscribe.
Yeah, the deadline, the filing deadline is tonight,
Every
as
night's
it
the filing
is
deadline.
every quarter or every month. Cool, thank you. Yeah, let's get started. So. One thing maybe to start to just lay the frame and piggybacking off on this thing of like things seem to have changed. You know, the ACLU, I was looking up the number, raised $24 million on a single weekend after the Muslim ban, which is 6 times as much as they raise online in a normal year. So things are definitely different. I'm curious to hear from folks who have a sense of this, of like, to what extent are things different? Maybe starting at the meta level, like the role of small dollar donors versus major donors, and how you feel like things have changed, and kind of what is the universe that we're in now. Johnathan, you want to start? Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that's changed from my perspective is that the internet has really come of age as a tool. Like, it's not that it hasn't been around for the last decade, but we're way past the Amazon bump that we needed, like way back when. People need to get comfortable with doing it, and now it's become the norm. And what that has changed radically, and particularly for small dollar donations, is the economies of scale and the efficiencies involved. And now you're seeing, because of this, you are seeing large organizations go after small dollars in a way that they really hadn't until the last few years. Like, that's the biggest shift. The other thing that's changed is the level of outrage, and we know that. That's the Trump effect, and that's, I think, what we saw with the ACLU more than anything else.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jesse.
I think a lot of the behavior over the last 8 years online with activism has been around petitions, and when you're outraged, sign a petition as a part of an email list build for a fundraising program. What things like GoFundMe have helped do is now it's popularized in culture the idea of creating a crowdfunding campaign around a cause. So JJ Watt, after the hurricane, is not going to sign a petition to say help people. He's going to raise $40 million on a crowdfunding campaign. We've seen that work, so we've worked really actively to build a mechanic that can hook into the same outrage and turn it into an action right up front through crowdfunding. And making sure that stuff is in place when the outrage is about to happen is what has been our biggest success. So we have this mechanism where people can collect pledges before they decide to officially run for office. We had a person in Utah who, Jason Chaffetz, was a despised person who wasn't investigating Russia. He's kind of a boogeyman of the Obama administration, and he had made some people angry. We had a member of someone go to Indivisible go to a town hall in Utah. Was like, you know what, I should look into running. She created a crowdfunding pledge collection campaign. And when Jason Chaffetz made his comment about the iPhone and how poor people shouldn't buy the new iPhone if they can't afford health insurance, and it made all that news, she had the mechanism in place. There was a small group of people that started sharing it on social media, so it built steam. That earned media because it was relevant in the news cycle. It got picked up all the way to the Rachel Maddow show, and she had $500,000 in a couple of days. And Jason Chaffetz announced he was out because she had a bigger war chest than he did. So I think that mechanic has changed a lot. We've gotten more direct with the fundraising ask, and the cycle used to be sign the petition, you get on an email list, then get spammed to death. And I think that's changing.
Spam's the best.
When it comes to innovation versus candidates, there's a confusion in this space, right? We understand billion-dollar startup funding VC model, and we understand impact investing, but this innovation around something that's impact but also has potential for ROI is kind of a funky space to raise money for, because people don't totally understand it. So there's a need for narrative, right? Like you have to have a really clear message, and you have to help people understand what you are and why they should care and why they should do something with that caring. And you got to kind of tell them what to do with it. So I think the narrative piece, because it's this wonky new space that people don't totally know, is kind of more crucial than it ever was before.
To that point, I think that we work with a lot of grassroots organizations, and I think we're at a real inflection moment right now where new people who've never participated in political process before are coming on board and identifying with organizations and giving to them and from the low dollar perspective, and people were really ready to move. And where we've seen some of the larger donors and larger dollars haven't quite moved at the same speed, although I think they're coming now. I think that it was interesting to see how in those key moments in history, people-powered campaigns were really the ones that were able to quickly pivot.
Yeah, and I think that's like worth emphasizing that if the small dollar donor energy hadn't been there after the election, none of the new groups that we're seeing now would still be around. I think it says a lot for both the infrastructure that's been built and for how folks have been able to leverage that energy. And for all of those of you who raised the hand when it was like I gave less than $27, like thanks to all of you, because we'd be in a very different shape if that wasn't the case. Let's talk about what actually motivates donors, in particular small, medium donors, to give and to give repeatedly. Maybe Kipp, if you want to start there.
Sure. So initially we did fundraising online, and it was really easy right after Trump won, obviously. We didn't do anything special. We weren't rocket scientists. We just asked people for money, and plenty came in. But now that's more difficult for us, for sure. And so we pivoted towards doing primarily in-person fundraising. We've found it to be tremendously effective, and it's old school, and it really works for a reason. People feel connected to you, and so if we're meeting with a candidate or we bring a candidate to them, it sort of like decentralizes the process and breaks the hierarchy where people feel very disconnected from politics. All of a sudden they're in the room with this person, and we brought them there because we're friends with them, and their friend brought this friend, family member came. For us, it's been really that simple. I think that there's no replacement for in-person fundraising. There's nothing like it. So that was yeah.
Yeah, I would have to agree. So with Tides Advocacy, we do see for fiscal sponsorship for particular organizations. So, for example, Indivisible, Working Families, Flint Rising, some of the Bay Area Women's March folks. And what I've seen as far as trends across both large emerging organizations as well as those who are well known, have a lot of media attention, is a multitude of strategies they have for the kind of three grouping of funders. There's the individual donors who are small, dollar amounts. There's the institutional donors, like for community foundations, family foundations, even private foundations. And then there's also those you kind of think about as your political donors who are looking more at candidates, who are looking more kind of specific elections. And the communication strategy needs to actually be diversified in order to reach them. And what we've seen been successful for individual donors is really around the cross-section of issues and then building constituencies for particular deadlines of things that matter. So, for example, one of the organizations we work with, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, has a ballot initiative that they're trying to get 600, they already have 600,000 signatures to really qualify in Florida to restore voting rights for 1.68 million people in Florida. That's a galvanizing force that is getting people to actually be more engaged in their democracy, and it's actually very much grassroots. They have a whole structure across the state of Florida to really have people doing door knocking, events, and they have a different strategy in place when they think about institutional donors, right? And then also when they think about for their ballot committee, they have a different strategy. So thinking about actually who you're trying to target, and with small donors, how are you actually engaging in more the grassroots organizing and the people power and the kind of motivation for them to actually engage and be a donor actually over a long period of time? Because it's not only about that ballot measure qualifying or being implemented, but who do you know in your family, in your community, who actually is touched by the criminal justice system? How are they disenfranchised? And so it becomes actually a larger issue versus a one-time thing in which they're donating for.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The thing I would add to this conversation is internet fundraising is no different than any other kind of fundraising, and we'd like to think it is.
Yeah. You have something you wanted to add, Jesse?
The motivation question and the connection question. I mean, we've looked at this and seen a couple of things. One, like I said up front, like the urgency to act on something they've seen is key towards the top of the funnel and getting people to donate. But what works in terms of longer term engagement, the key is always for us community. And so not just like the one-off ask and then you get a spam alert that says everything's over. It's when we can connect people either to like long-term kind of storytelling through our crowdfunding stuff with like a lot of updates and people can hear over and over again from the original person they donated to, or we've also have a program where we basically kind of just keep exposing people to the same type of thing they liked in the beginning with sort of a unique take to it. So if we have people show up who are kind of first-time candidates who took on a bad person, now we have this whole story series in the stories community where every time someone new emerges, we connect them to this group of donors and then celebrate their success. And that works pretty well. And whether it's online or offline, like offline, the kitchen table is like the best place for a community to start growing. And then online, what it allows you to do is just keep connecting people to that healthy and vibrant community. So a lot of the times investing in the quality of creating an initial core of folks is really helpful, and then use the online to scale that out. Take what works, take what people like at the healthy core, and then more people will connect to it. And the online stuff brings the network. And I wanted to talk to you, you're running for alderman, I want to talk, you were asking about like $5, like how do you engage like Laura, like I think one of the things that really helps is that we've seen, I've seen in the, not just at CrowdPAC but other things, when people donate $5, they're invested in the idea of helping you in. And again, the more you can take those folks and build that community, like having buy into the community, the healthier folks will be. And like our platforms, we scale up the numbers so you can see how many donors are donating, and then people can feel bought into that like thermometer aspect. Howard Dean put online fundraising on the map in politics, and like his community was his blog and was super healthy, and they put up a baseball bat, and like everybody would be invested in getting the baseball bat to rise. And that's when, even if they're giving low amounts of dollars, the more people that can see the network effect of their participation on their goal, that's the value. And so the small dollars are most valuable when they're connected to a lot of other people giving small amounts.
I want to just kind of double click on this point of community, because I think we can all agree that like that is a core piece. But I think for a lot of people that I talk to, like you might not feel like you know enough people, right? So if you're like, okay, I have this great thing maybe, but like I know 5 people I can ask for money, like where do I go from there? So I'm curious, maybe Kipp, to the point of like you're going to all these places and bringing people together in person, that sounds like insanity. And also, what's the advice on, it is so tempting once you have a list to like make it all about the urgency because you need the money now, and while recognizing that you might actually be better off building the community, it can be challenging to actually make that decision day to day. So curious to hear a little bit more on this community piece and how to actually make it work.
So I'm like a Joe Schmo. These people are all very impressive people. I'm just a person who, it's true. It's true. All I did was like, after Trump won, I reached out to some friends and friends reached out to friends. It's really point A to point B. The hardest thing to get past is just the inertia or thinking like, oh, I don't have enough friends that probably do this, or, you just do it. And like Tuesday nights, you stay up maybe a little past 9 while you're watching a show, you're like sending some emails out, just get the work done. You'll get there in no time. I think that you do definitely have the network available. It's just a question of whether you're willing to put in the work, and that's really all that we did. I wasn't connected in politics in any way. There wasn't anything special to it. So
cool.
Yeah.
And I think that people are wanting, whether it's high dollar donors or low dollar donors, people are wanting to be in community. I think everything that people are experiencing right now is very tough and difficult times. So people are looking for uplifting ways of joining together and feeling some sort of united strength around their actions. So I think that the other way to increase community is to try to figure out what skill sets everybody can bring to the table and engage people in ways that this straight transactional giving has become exhausting. So how can you use people's skill sets to apply to this current moment to the best of your ability, as well as asking for community within fundraising?
Yeah, I think, and to Kipp's point too, of like you've got to do the work. I think you also need to show up, and not just like where you normally would go, but in places that you wouldn't, and meet people. When it comes to like why the larger donors are taking a longer time, right? There's so many new players, they want to get to know everyone, right? Yeah, they're trying to figure out answers and who's gonna succeed, but there's this community element even with the really big donors.
Definitely.
So this same like relationship that we're talking about with the smaller people, it's what happens when, you know, we talk about capital in startup land is like getting someone to work on what you're trying to build for free, right? Like them spending their time is also them making a small dollar or sometimes very large dollar donation to a project. And most of that happens from meeting in person. It can happen if you have like a real intense Slack community where people are talking all of the time, but it's the relationship and caring about the same thing and feeling connected that moves things forward.
So what about the email, like cultivating your email list versus the all caps email? Like when is it good? If you're thinking about this long-term engagement, what are the moments, like how do you think about, this is the moment actually for the all caps email, this is the moment of urgency, or how do you kind of strategically balance the two? How much of your list should you be willing to burn, if at all? Like give us a little bit of the tangible and some of that. Or Jesse, what you've seen actually work.
End of quarter, then all caps it.
Every day.
You know, we have been building a small but I think strong kind of email list. It's not massive or anything, and you know, we have found, but you know, reflecting what people originally donated for has been the most effective way to get them to re-engage. So some people are primed because they signed up for your list because they were like, what do I do? Sign a petition, and now they're being primed every time to be like, everything's over. I have to give $5 again. Every time. And so the people do it because it works, right? Like burn and churn can work, and if you're the D-Trip and you've built this huge list, it'll work just like sending out scammy mail, direct mail to old people, make them feel like the government's foreclosing on their house so they mail you a $10 check or something. I don't know, I get those direct mail like, this is targeted so wrong. Yeah, so I mean, it works at times, but we found what works is just reflect back what people originally came to you for, and try to optimize around that. So we did a lot of experimentation around the format, the tone, and found that basically just telling the same type of story that caused them to donate with a particular format, particular weighting, and a particular photo just gives us a great return every single time. And I think we just were very deliberate up front just to see what those initial folks would bite on, and it's worked in terms of not only with them, but more people that are coming through. We haven't done a ton of, all of our email stuff's been organic. We haven't done a ton of direct acquisition outside of a campaign we did with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But that wasn't even direct acquisition. Those people that donated to his cause to fund the Supreme Court fight against gerrymandering that we re-engaged. But that's been the key for us, is just sort of be mindful of how people found you and figure out ways to get them to respond at the same rate. And then we found if we connect new people to it, they respond to it as well. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the big questions in this area that people forget is it depends what your time horizon is and what you're trying to build. And it's not you're trying to win this election, because most people who are running for office plan to run for either that office or another office again. It's about building that relationship and not burning that bridge. And I think that one of the problems we have on the left is we have some very, very large list players who don't actually act in the long-term interest of their organizations, like corporations, and we saw this with Lehman Brothers. They act in the short-term interest of the people who are making the decisions for the entity, and being very, very mindful of your role within an organization. Yes, you have your financial targets to hit this month. Yes, you need money right now, but you're also going to need money in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year horizons, and just keeping that in mind, because I think that a lot of people burn out their lists a lot too fast, and it works for them in the short term, and then they're gone, and that can be a problem for the organization, moving forward.
To that point, we ran focus groups in Wisconsin and Florida, and in our focus groups, people told us, they echoed back to us, we don't want to watch your movement. We want you to show us how to start ours, or how to be how to make it a part of ours. And so when we're thinking about that sort of thing, I always, in the calm moments in those emails, what can you provide? What on-ramp to civic engagement? What access can you give back to the population that's on your list? Is there a bit of information that would be helpful depending on what issue you organize around? Is there direct access to a leader who might, write an inspirational paragraph? Is there something that you can provide and think about your own give before, or at least at the same time as asking for the individuals to give back to you?
One of what you just said made me think of one of the things that I've heard a number of folks who engage a lot is like volunteers now want to be asked to do big things. And so in the same way that you were pointing out, like no one wants to sign petition, now people are like, oh, I'll just give $5. But I think maybe piggybacking off of what you were saying, and earlier we were alluding to also like how do you identify people's strength and how might you leverage that? I'm curious, so obviously it's much more complicated, right, to give volunteers or would-be volunteers something meaningful to do that is tailored to their strengths. Also, if you need the money, like you kind of just want to get the money and not create work for people. So how do you all think about navigating that of like engaging your donors more meaningfully while realizing that really maybe you just need the cash?
I think what a lot of donors don't have is something that the political class takes for granted, which is a ton of information, right? So we try to provide research. We try to anything that is in our wheelhouse that kind of seems like everyday information. Sometimes to an outside donor who's not involved in the process, it seems like a piece of gold or something that can help guide them in their communities when they go back to it. So I think that's what we think about. I'd be interested to hear what everybody else thinks about.
Yeah, I could think about, is this on? Oh, okay. So folks can hear me, just making sure. An example is Flint Rising, which has been really organized around the water crisis in Flint. And instead of it being focused on kind of environmental justice, has expanded it to be also about economic justice and racial justice. And part of what I think has been really successful for them, really plugging people in beyond them being donors, is direct action and then also media. And then also leadership training. So around direct action, for example, they galvanize specific neighborhoods to actually put in like little notes in bottles, and actually got a whole bus load of little bottles filled with notes saying, my water is poisoning me. You need to take action, governor, city council members, folks who are in charge of my water, and delivered it to the Capitol. And so that's a small action, right? And you feel a part of something larger. It's not only like, okay, you're asking me to donate, but you're asking me to donate and actually be a part of something larger and actually getting my voice out there, even though I feel like I'm only one person. So direct action matters. The second piece I would be, advocating for is how do people become a part of your movement for a long-term strategy. So what they did was actually have leadership training in neighborhoods to say, actually, how can you be empowered knowing that you are not a victim, knowing that you actually have the skill sets necessary to engage in this democracy, and let us actually help you to actually be a part of how decision-making happens in political spheres, right? So not only saying, let me take your $5 or $10 donation, let me actually help you engage so you actually can lead others within your own community. And then media. So they actually have an amazing communications and social media strategy where they're keeping current with what's actually on the news. They actually have a Lifetime movie coming out that actually features the director of that organization in terms of, now that we have a media moment, how do we capitalize off of that to get small dollar donations, right? And so actually thinking about how do you consistently talk about the narrative of what the work you're doing, and then also make sure that you are communicating that to your network as well.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. The first is recurring donations are a really, really good tool in both online space. They're very efficient online, but also they free you from having to ask for money all the time and allow you to feel as an organization you are already getting a donation from this, or as a campaign, you're already getting a donation from this person, so you actually have to think about how to engage them outside of that monetary ask. So it's both a great funding mechanism and also a great, it sort of forces your hand in sort of keeping them engaged without just sending them fundraising emails. The other thing I realized I didn't mention earlier that I think sort of plays into this is innovative asks. People are getting a lot of the same sky is falling asks, and you have to figure out how to break through that noise like, some of it can be differentiating with your own sort of personal story, particularly if you're a candidate, or your own specific issue. That will get you some of the way there. But thinking about ways to ask them to engage and to give money that they've not been asked before is a really good thought experiment for anyone who's engaging in fundraising.
I would just add quickly, for us, personification has worked very well. We try to personify like everything we can. So we have interviews with our candidates. We do podcasts. Just like bring people in where they feel like they're with you. Like, and what you're doing is about people, and they're meeting the people. Personifying every issue by interviewing people who are involved in that issue, that kind of thing, or bringing speakers who can speak to these things. So.
Awesome. We are, let me just see what other questions folks have. I think we just have 10 minutes. Okay, we have less, 7 minutes. Ta-ta-ta-ta. Go ahead. So innovation in technology specifically? Or just innovation in fundraising? Yeah. What's next? What's next?
Voter Circle, I heard about that today. That seemed pretty cool.
Saying who runs Voter Circle. Did you pay him for this? He like walked in right in time.
The one thing I would say.
He told me to do that.
We do have a one-click email acquisition fundraising tool that we've added to the platform.
Yeah.
Great. What is the website?
Votercircle.com.
There we go. You can go there and learn more.
Votercircle.com. Like I sang a song.
Great. Where are we going next?
I was actually going to say that the technology actually doesn't matter. Like texting, I mean, there are things that add efficiencies. There are things that, you know, a new platform will rise, Facebook. And I will say, it's worth pointing out that Facebook only in the last year has really figured out how to fundraise within its own platform. Lots of people have tried. Facebook never engaged. They finally did this year. I think they saw something had changed and the time had come. But it's not so much about the tools. It's about the relationships and about the asks. It's about making people feel that their money matters, making sure that ask comes from someone they don't want to say no to, whether it's a celebrity or you as a leader that they trust, or better yet, their friends or family.
We've seen a bunch of people trying to create these platforms of like, I care, I want to do something, how do I find the thing, and how do I contribute? And a lot of them are delineating it by like, I want to give money, so here are the people that need money, or I want to show up to a meeting, so like these are the places I can show up, or I want to donate my skill, and like these are the places I can volunteer. I will say that there are a lot of people building that same like volunteer or show up in a whatever you prefer kind of funnel in a lot of different ways, and I don't know that any of them have done it super well yet, so that's maybe an area that might end up getting more sort of like the kayak for how do I get involved, right? People are thinking about it, but I don't know that it's totally figured out yet.
I think it's a great question because, and one that's going to be decided in real time. I think the good news is there are a ton of very talented people who have flooded into the civic space. So that gives me a lot of hope for all of the new programs and organizations that pop up. I think we have 6,000 new organizations since the election, plus a ton of really great established organizations that already existed beforehand. And I think that it's really going to be up to small dollar funders and the large funders to decide kind of what the landscape looks like in the future. It'll be interesting to see which ideas receive the kind of backing that they need to really flourish, and what people on the ground, users, really want to interact with. And what's going to be the most effective in campaigns coming up. But I think it's a landscape that will be decided by small and large donors.
I have something.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's been just changing everything faster than people can keep up with is just how fast and powerful networks are becoming. Networks of people, networks of technology, just connection like on a crazy scale across the world. I personally feel like it's why things like alt-right and ISIS and all these things pop up out of nowhere, and we're like, what the heck? It's the same as the protests in Tahrir Square. It's because people are now all networked like crazy, and things spread, ideas spread. but it also gives us the ability to build things that can turn networks into really efficient ways to do fundraising. Voter Circle's great on the voter contact side, and things like Hustle have changed how people do voter contact. I think some of that stuff will come to fundraising. So the more tools that can help people connect to their pre-existing networks, more efficiently analyze their lists and ask them for direct donations, then also turn them into fundraisers by allowing them to do the same thing. I think the efficiency people will see in that and the returns people will see in that will be kind of a next big wave in terms of how people end up doing fundraising. The peer-to-peer stuff is massive, and the more that you can empower people, not just to give you $5 or $10 or a maxed out donation, but to also activate their network and so on, that's gonna be when we're making huge strides in being more efficient and powerful fundraisers and keeping all these people who came to us once super valuable long term.
One last question. Mika.
Yeah, what if tech is quicksand? If we're just standing on quicksand and you're throwing us bricks as we struggle.
I mean, I relate. I kind of feel like I'm barely gasping for air because of tech right now. I think.
What do you mean by bricks? Like, what are the bricks?
Just more tech.
Ah.
Yeah, I deactivated my Facebook account.
Really empower them, don't engage them, but make money. I mean, I just want to second what, I don't know your name, but
Romy.
what you said about Flint.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the organizing I'm hearing about, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be an early proponent of tech. I've become an early rejecter.
Yeah, I'm
As
with
a guy
you.
who runs a political tech conference,
I mean,
the moment. Go ahead.
From our perspective, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the concerns personally. Professionally, I mean, the things that keep me coming to work every day and trying to build this stuff is just seeing first-time people engaging, first-time candidates asking their friends for money for the first time. The percentage of people that are making donations through our platform for the first time is really huge. A lot of our donors, like 40% of our donors, haven't done it before. And it's really from, I mean, our whole philosophy is to take the friction out of people to get involved in politics, hopefully locally. And what we've seen, and this is the thing you have to avoid, is like the promise of Facebook and all these things at the beginning was like this great egalitarian connection machine, and then you realize, oh, there's a huge consequence to connecting everything that we're not ready for. You know, I think what we're seeing right now is like, you know, 93% of the campaigns are super progressive right now on CrowdPAC, and like it's awesome. It's the people that need it. You know, and the thing we think about is how do we control that and make that sustainable and make sure it doesn't turn into empowering the very elements that we're worried about combating.
Yeah, and just to, I mean, from someone who is helping to get innovative tech off the ground, it's not an or conversation, it's an and conversation. We view it as sort of a skateboard. Like if you have both feet on the skateboard, you're not going anywhere. If you've got both feet on the ground, you're not going anywhere. So how can we amplify the speed and really help each other? It's got to be an and.
Thank you all so much. It's all about relationships, friends. So go make some friends, and thank you all for your time. Thanks for the panel.
Thank you.